Hey, how's it going, everyone? Today I'm going to be going over replacing these door hinges back here. That's a hinge back there, as well as the roller pin for a 94 Chevy pickup truck. So each door has two hinges. So this is the bottom one, and then you got the top one over here, and then this right here is your roller pin. If you own one of these, you're probably used to hearing this. The squeaky noise, and it's not closing properly. You have to slam it to get it to close properly. Alright, let's get started. This right here on my right hand side are the door pins. So again, two for each side, and then you got your little bag of bushings in there, and the bushings is usually what goes out and what causes the door to sag and doesn't allow you to close it properly unless you slam it shut. Next, these door roller pins. So these are what holds the door at the halfway position and then at the fully open position. Usually the bottom of it snaps off, or the bushing wears out, or it just stops working right, or you hear the squeak just like mine. So for those, we got doorman part number 38433. These are part number OT269. I got these off Amazon because the reviews for them were pretty solid. I'll post a link to it in the description. I'm not sure who the manufacturer is for these, but they had pretty good reviews. I would suggest against the doorman hinges. Next is the door spring tool, part number W84603. You're going to use this door spring tool to compress the spring. Let me show you guys where that is. The spring is actually down here, and you're going to put one side of the tool here and then the other side here. Tighten down this bolt on this end right here. It'll compress the two arms on this tool, and it'll compress your spring. You'll be able to get it out. Well, let me get started with the hinge on the top driver's side. To get this job done, it would be better if you guys had a second hand to hold the door here for you, as well as a car jack. And the car jack, you'll put it underneath the door, and it'll just support the weight of the door. You're not actually lifting up the door. This right here is where the cables pass through. You can either leave these plugged in, or you can disconnect them. Disconnect this harness right here so you can fully remove the door. That way you'll get complete access to all this, and it makes the whole job a lot simpler. Remove this piece right here, and it'll give you access to the harness back there. So I ended up pulling out this little cover right here. The plastic trim piece is being held down by 3 metal clips. Sometimes the metal clips get stuck to the body of the truck, so make sure to watch out for that. I managed to pull out one of these connectors right here. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect it now. And so I got this harness disconnected right here. What keeps it together is this tab right here on the left hand side. It locks onto that piece right there. I used a pick to lift it up, and then I just pulled them apart. Once this harness is disconnected, it should give you enough space to pull the other one towards you. It's just being held down by that tab. Again, I'm going to grab a pick, lift up that little tab, and it should release that. So it gave me a little more trouble, a little more force to pull it apart, but once that tab is lifted up, it will separate. So I got those two disconnected, and now I'm going to, before I forget to show you guys, I do have my little setup here, and it's holding the bottom of the door. The next item that needs to be removed is the spring back here. Compress that spring enough for you to be able to get it out of there. I'm going to go ahead and use the door spring tool, and I actually noticed there is some instructions in the back. Once you run that nut down, it'll compress the tool. So it's actually a 13 millimeter nut on the end of the tool. It'd be easiest if you use a ratcheting wrench like this. I got my tool in place here to start removing the spring. Harness connectors are getting a little bit in the way, so I'm going to go ahead and pull my tool back off, push the head of those connectors back in. With those connectors out of the way, and I'll grab my tool. I'll try to grab the spring closest to the edge as possible. That way when it comes time to compress it, it won't give you too much of a hard time getting it out of there. I got my tool in place. I ran down the nut a little bit by hand, and I'm going to use the tool to run it down the rest of the way to start compressing that spring. Before you start running it down, that you push the tool all the way in, as far into the spring as it'll go. So I'm going to start running it down. And you can see that spring is starting to become loose because it's being compressed. Keep in mind, this spring is under a lot of pressure. By you compressing it like this, you can back the nut back off and take the tension off the spring. Again, remember it's under a lot of tension, so you need to be careful. Back here, one end of the spring was resting on this right here, and the other end of the spring was resting on this piece right here. Next item is to go ahead and start removing this pin up here, and then I'll start addressing the pin down here. There's two different size bushings. One of them is bigger than the other one, so just take a look when yours comes out. So unfortunately I missed it, but the spring compressor let go of that spring and it came flying out. It almost hit me. Thankfully it was just resting here, and no accidents happened today, but be careful where you set that spring compressor. Start removing the locking ring for the top hinge. The locking ring went out flying on me, but I got it. That's what it looks like. So just using the pick was more than enough. And come back here and start hitting the head of that hinge to get it to slide out. I went ahead and got this pin out already. I hit the head of it with this lady's foot. You can also use something like this. This is just a punch. Okay, so I'm gonna get it out the rest of the way. I'm just gonna see if I can get to it down here. Yep, wiggles out pretty easy. Pull the harness back a little so it gives me more space to get that out of there. So that's what your door pin looks like. Alright, so what we're looking at here is the second door hinge pin. I'm going to go ahead and start driving this one out. This one you hit from the bottom and the pin will slide up. I'm going to try my best and show you guys how I'm going to get this other pin out of here. I'm using the little the lady's foot bar that I have. Use the head of this bar to hit the pin from the bottom and get it to slide up. I'm also using a mallet, just a regular mallet. You guys can use a hammer, whatever you want to use to hit the pin. It's starting to slide up now. I'm going to try to get that pin the rest of the way out of there. That's the pin right there. At this point, the door is loose. The weight of it is being held by the jack, as well as it resting over here. The other end is being held by the corner of the house. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the door. Nothing else holding it. Both of the harness connectors are disconnected, and that speaker wire was cut as well. I'm not sure how well this footage is going to come out, but I'll try my best to show you how I get this door out of here. Door is off, and I've got it sitting here on top of my jack. I actually ended up releasing the jack to let it drop the door down some so I can get it out. So I'm just gonna set it on the ground here. It is a pretty heavy door, so just be advised. The door is out. The roller pin, which is this one right here, the bushing is pretty worn out. You could probably see it from the bottom. To get this out, come up here, grind the head of this off or cut it off. Once you get that off, you can hit it with something to drive it the rest of the way down. I'm going to be using my Sawzall with one of these blades. You can get these at Home Depot. They're really good. I use them all the time. They're the Diablo 6-inch medium metal blades. Alright, so I'll try my best to get some footage for you guys of me cutting this. I'm going to be using my lady's foot again with the hammer. It's now time to start driving these bushings out of there. This one needs to come out from the bottom. You push it back up, and then this one is the opposite, so you push from the top, it'll slide out from the bottom. Pushed my extension through first, through the hole, through the bottom bushing hole. Attached my 8mm socket, and if you notice, matches up perfectly to the diameter of that bushing. Hit it from the bottom, and it started already popping it out right there. Okay, so the 6mm ended up fitting perfectly. I did notice that the bushing on the bottom was so worn out that you could literally just push it. So I got it more than halfway out by hand already. I'm going to use my 1/4-inch socket to finish getting it the rest of the way out. Again, make note of which size bushing came out of where. For the bottom one, what I ended up doing was using my 1/4" extension, fed it all the way through the hole, grabbed my lady's foot and then hit it like that, and it came out. So I went ahead and cleaned this up a little. I'm also gonna throw a little bit of paint on there where it got damaged. So I used some of this rust performer. The next item is the bushings for the hinge pins. So I'm going to be installing the smaller one on top and the bigger one on the bottom. The smaller one on top gets driven in from the top going down, and the one on the bottom gets driven in from the bottom going up. I've gone ahead and taken them out of the bag and I've separated them. The ones on the left are the bigger ones, the ones on the right are the smaller ones. And the way you can tell them apart is to slide them onto the pin, and you'll notice that the bigger bushing has a lot more space up top and then it's tighter towards the bottom. And then the smaller bushing fits a lot better towards the top of the pin. And you can also see that on the pin itself, towards the head of the pin, it's a lot thicker here and then thinner here. To get the hinge pins in here, put the top one in from the bottom going up so that the thicker part of the pin is at the bottom, and then the pin that goes on the bottom bracket, the thicker part sits at the top. So it goes in from the top going down, the one on the top goes in from the bottom going up. All right, so I'm now going to drive this bushing in here, and the smaller one goes up top and it goes in this way, and then the bottom one goes in from the bottom, and the bottom bushing is going to be your bigger one. Let me explain to you guys how I'm going to drive this bushing in there. I've got my bushing here on the left hand side, and then I've got a nut and a bolt and a socket. I'm going to put my bushing up here, and then I'm going to feed my bolt through it, and then once that bushing is driven in there, it's going to go a little bit past the bracket where it sits on. That's where my socket comes into play. It's got enough space for that bushing to sit inside of the socket, and then I'm going to grab my nut and thread it in towards the bottom, and this is what's actually going to help drive it down. Once that bushing makes it past that metal plate, it has enough space to fit inside of that socket. That's what the setup looks like right there. Again, just make sure to line up your socket right in the middle where that bushing is going to fall into it, and then I'll show you guys how I'm going to drive this down. That bushing is sitting flat on there now, so I'm going to go ahead and pull my setup back out. And then that's what the finished product looks like. Bushing is driven all the way in. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for the bushing on the bottom. The bushing on the bottom goes in from the bottom going up. I got the bottom one driven in as well. Looking at it from the bottom, you could tell it's flush. From the top, the splines got damaged a little bit. That's because the socket was too small. So next time, I'll grab a slightly bigger socket for the bottom bushing. I'm going to be doing the bottom bracket now, and the pin for the bottom bracket goes in from the top, slides down. The head of the pin is the thicker end, so the bigger bushing will go on the top and the smaller bushing will go on the bottom. It's going to be the same process to drive those bushings in. For the bushing at the bottom here, I'm going to be doing the same thing. I am going to grab my 1/4" extension and socket and hammer those out of there. Okay, so once again, I'll feed in the extension and then attach my socket to it, and then just hammer it from the top. I got that bottom bushing out of there. I'm now going to start removing this bushing up here. So I got both of my bushings out of there. One on the right came out from the top, and the one on the left came out from the bottom. Right side is a bigger one, left side is a smaller one. I've got both of my new bushings here. The one on the right is the bigger one, the one on the left is the smaller one. So I'm going to start driving that in there. I'll be using the same method again with the bolt and the nut. I'm now going to be installing my roller pin, and if you take a look at the other end, so this is the end that comes out on the top, you can see that there's a little C clip. I'm going to go ahead and remove that, and that gets installed at the end once you slide the roller pin all the way up. That keeps the pin from backing out. So I got the C clip taken out of the roller pin. This is a little thicker than the factory one. So I brought the roller pin over here to my bench grinder, and I started taking off a little bit of material there. Again, I didn't take off too much. I'm going to try it out. I started hammering the new roller pin in. Be careful because I hit hit this one on the edge and I broke the edge of that off. Cool, so it looks like that worked. I started hammering it in already and it's already going in, so I'm gonna keep hammering it. Alright guys, so that's about as much as I'm going to drive it in. You could see the head of the pin there, enough for that C-clip to grab onto. You could see how much the splines were starting to come up, and then there's still some splines towards the bottom. The goal is for this right here to grab onto this little arm that's part of the door, so the roller pin just rides on top of that. So you sit your little E-ring on there and press it together. The purpose of that E-ring is to prevent that pin from backing out. Now I'm ready to start putting this door back up here, so I'm going to grab the door and sit it on the brackets for the hinges. I forgot to mention this, but when you're mounting your door, it's important that this piece that rides on the roller pin gets pushed in, because if it's sticking back over here, you won't be able to close the door. It'll be hitting on the frame of the truck, so make sure to push this in when you mount the door and put your pins back in. After battling with this for a while, I ended up moving the little rubber boot out of the way, and now I have my pins aligned here on both holes on the bottom and then on both holes on the top. And then I went to go get a long extension. I think it's like a 2 foot 3/8 extension. I got both of the pins in. This one down here gave me a little trouble. I had to hit it a little harder than the other one, so the head of it got a little bit mushroom. But the other one didn't give me nearly as much trouble. So at this point, they're both in, and the last thing left is to put the E-clip on there. They both take an E-clip. One is for the pin on the top and the other is for the pin on the bottom. So I'm getting ready to put the E-clip back in, but I noticed that the notch where that E-clip would engage on the pin that's on the top is actually sticking out about a good 1/4 of an inch past where it would be flush. I'm not sure why it came out like that. I went ahead and checked the old pins and they're all the same length. It might have been like that from the factory, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is reuse this old retaining clip along with the E-clip. So both of them will be holding that pin, and the one on the bottom will just be getting the normal E-clip, because the one on the bottom comes out exactly where that E-clip would hold it. Got the old lock ring in there. I actually ended up using this long screwdriver from Harbor Freight, and now I'm going to put my E-clip in there as well. Just using my needle nose pliers, and I'm just going to push it in place. I'm going to grab my second E-ring and put it on the bottom pin. The bottom pin is a little trickier, but just push it in there and it'll lock itself into place. One of the last items is to put the spring back. So I'm going to compress my spring again. Get the legs of the tool as far into the spring as possible, but before it reaches the edge of the spring, because otherwise the tool is going to be hitting the door and you're not going to be able to release it into the seat where the spring sits. I'm now going to start running it into its location. If you look, this circular end is where one of the ends of the spring will sit on, and then this other end right here, it's almost got like a notch right there where it locks into. That's where the other end of the spring will go. I got the spring to partially go in its seat. Now I'm going to relieve the pressure. You probably heard the spring click there. That was just the spring going back into its seat where it belongs. This end of the spring will sit here, and this end of the spring will sit here. I temporarily pushed my wires through there. We're gonna try the door again. It closes nicely. At this point, the last thing left to do is to put back the rubber boot and connect my harness together. I'm gonna go ahead and pull the other harness that's inside right here and connect it back together, and then pull my rubber boot back on there as well. And I'm just gonna plug these cables back into the connector. So the easiest way I think to put this stuff back together is to pull all the slack out of the wiring coming from the truck and pull as much slack as possible from the wiring coming from the door. I put my rubber boot back onto the cables coming from the door. The cables are connected again. I'm going to push the excess wire back in that hole. You have to make sure that this part of the boot is inside of the hole. And that's what it looks like once it's sitting flush. Same idea with this side. I'm not sure if this is necessary. I'm going to add a little bit of grease here where the arm contacts the roller pin. If we close the door now, For the opposite door, I followed the same process. Some of you may have noticed I used footage from the opposite door when demonstrating how to replace the bushings that are attached to the door. I ended up screwing up when working on the bottom bushings for the driver's side door. I thought the bushings were supposed to be on the bottom bracket attached to the truck, and I noticed there were none. The hole was also too small for the bushings to go in. This was because the bottom bushings are supposed to be installed on the bottom bracket attached to the door, not the bracket attached to the truck. I foolishly opened up the holes on the truck's bracket and installed my bushings on it, only to later realize my mistake. I ended up leaving the new bushings I installed on the bottom bracket attached to the truck, as well as the old bushings attached to the door bottom bracket. It was a tight fit for the door hinge pin, but it worked. Despite screwing up, the door does close properly now, and I fixed my problem. Just something to keep in mind so you guys don't screw up the way I did. Thank you guys for watching. I got more content coming soon. I'm working on doing an LS swap for this truck and restoring a first-gen Camaro. If you guys are interested, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you know when I upload videos.